She means well. She's just always needed a little more looking after than the rest of us." My brother paused to let the room absorb the laugh he'd already scheduled for them, swirling his champagne glass with the easy confidence of someone who had never, not once in his 36 years, doubted his own right to take up space. "Remember when Mum and Dad had to bail her out? Twice?" The laughter in the rented hall rose around me, like water filling a room with no exits. I was standing 12 feet away. In a teal dress, I had driven 4 hours to Ottawa from my apartment in Kingston to alter myself, holding a champagne flute I couldn't bring myself to drink from. So 68 people who knew my name laughed at a version of my life that had never been true. My name is Jody. I am 32 years old, and for most of my life, I have worked very hard to believe that my brother loved me in his way. It was easier than the alternative. Follow this story all the way to the end, and drop a comment letting me know what city you're watching from. I want to see how far these words travel. My brother is 4 years older than me. He is polished in the way that comes naturally to people who have never been told no by anyone whose opinion they respected. Growing up in our family's house in Canada, on the west end of Ottawa, he was the kind of son our parents built their entire social identity around. Every hockey trophy got a mention at the dinner table. Every business school acceptance became a story told at church. Every promotion at the Bay Street firm in Toronto, where he'd spent the last decade, was announced to extended family like a corporate press release. My mother narrating each milestone with the breathless pride of someone who had personally engineered it. He was their evidence that they had done everything right, their proof of concept. I was quieter, bookish. I became a primary school teacher, which my mother delivered to new acquaintances with the particular tone she reserved for things that were technically acceptable, but privately not what she'd had in mind. I didn't take it personally, or I told myself I didn't. I loved my job. I loved watching a child who couldn't sound out 3-letter words in September suddenly racing through chapter books in May. It felt like a miracle every single time, and it was mine, and I had chosen it deliberately. And for a long time that felt like enough. The harder years came when I was 28. My marriage ended after 2 years, and what it left behind was a mountain of joint debt my ex-husband had quietly accumulated in both our names. Credit lines I hadn't known were maxed, a truck loan I hadn't signed for, a home equity advance I had technically approved during a period when I was too exhausted and too trusting to read what I was signing. When he left the debt behind like furniture. He didn't want to move. I spent the next 3 years paying it off. 3 years of packed lunches, of skipped vacations, of saying no to things so many times that no became my default setting. I tracked every dollar on a spreadsheet I updated on Sunday nights with the grim dedication of someone running a campaign. They were not sure they could win. Slowly, my credit score climbed back. The calls from collection agencies stopped. I slept through the night again. I did not ask my parents for money, not once. I did not ask because I knew how asking worked in my family. It became a debt of a different kind, one with no fixed repayment schedule and compounding interest in the form of mentions at the dinner table for years afterward. I called my mother one evening when I was genuinely at my lowest. It was February, dark by 4 in the afternoon, and I was eating toast for dinner because I was trying to put an extra $200 onto a credit card that month. And I told her what was happening. I told her because I needed someone to talk to. I needed to say the words out loud to another human being. I wasn't asking for anything. I just needed to not be alone in it for one phone call. She said the right things. She said she was sorry. She said she was proud of me for handling it myself. She said call anytime. What I didn't know was that she told my brother. When he announced his engagement to a registered nurse he had met at a fundraising dinner in Toronto, our whole family was genuinely happy. His fiancée was sharp and warm and asked real questions when you talked to her. The kind of person who remembered what you'd said the last time you spoke and followed up on it the next time. I liked her immediately and carefully, the way you like someone when you're not entirely sure whether you're allowed to. She seemed to see something in my brother that the rest of us were always waiting for him to show us. I wanted that to be real. I helped plan the engagement party from Kingston. I spent evenings on the phone with the venue coordinator in Ottawa, argued gently with the caterer about the appetizer timeline, designed a photo display using pictures I'd gathered from family albums and his fiancée's Instagram. I drove up 2 weekends before the party to help set up, and I stayed up past midnight the Friday before to finish a hand-lettered sign for the entrance table, because the one they'd ordered online arrived damaged, and I didn't want them to walk into nothing. I did all of this because I show up. I have always shown up, even when showing up cost me more than I could afford to give. The party was on a Saturday evening in late April, when Ottawa had finally decided it was spring, and the cherry trees along the canal were just starting to open. The hall was warm and well lit, 68 guests, filling it with the particular energy of people who are happy to be there. Cousins, neighbors, colleagues, family friends I recognized from 100 Christmas Eves. My brother moved through the room like someone who had planned for this exact level of adoration. His fiancée was quieter, but just as present, catching my eye across the room at one point and giving me a smile that felt genuinely private. For the first hour, I circulated. I topped up drinks I wasn't supposed to be in charge of. I made sure the caterers were on schedule and that the right trays were going to the right tables. 3 colleagues from my school board were there as family friends, and I chatted with them about a reading program we'd both implemented. And for a while, the evening felt like what it was supposed to be. A celebration. Then my brother stood up and tapped his glass. He was a skilled speaker. He'd always been. He had the kind of voice that quieted a room without demanding it, and he used it like a conductor who already knows what every instrument is about to do. He thanked people warmly. He talked about his fiancée with a tenderness I hadn't expected, and I felt something loosen in my chest, a hope I'd been carrying for years that kept almost dying and then didn't. Maybe this was the version of him she had made possible. Maybe the life he was building with her had made him someone I could finally stop bracing myself around. Then he turned toward me. He said it the way cruelty gets said when it's smart about itself, with the laugh pre-installed, so anyone who flinches becomes the problem. He said our family had always had one overachiever and one project. And the room chuckled with the uncertain energy of guests who weren't sure if they were in on the joke or witnessing something. He said I had always needed a little more help than the rest of them. He said, loudly, in front of 68 people, including 3 colleagues from the school board who would absolutely remember this, that our parents had bailed me out twice when I was struggling. He said it with affection in his voice. He made it sound like a roast. He made it sound like the kind of ribbing that only happens between people who love each other. So much the embarrassment is proof of warmth. He was describing someone who had never existed, built from private details I had shared with my mother on a February night when I was eating toast for dinner and needed a single human being to hear me. He had inflated the story, distorted it, handed it to 68 people as evidence that I was the lesser child, and framed his own imaginary generosity as the reason I was still standing. My parents had given me nothing, not $1. The debt was gone because I had paid it off alone, one Sunday night spreadsheet at a time. But the room didn't know that. The room had just been told. I did not cry. I had learned over a long time that crying in front of my brother was like pouring water on a grease fire. I stood very still and I smiled, the careful smile I had spent 3 decades developing. The one that takes up just enough of my face to register as fine without requiring any actual feeling behind it. I looked at the floor. I counted the tiles, which were a kind of off-white travertine that had been buffed recently enough to still show the grain. I counted them until I reached 12, and the counting stopped helping. From across the room, I heard my mother laugh. Her laugh when she's anxious is always too fast and too light, like a bird startled off a wire. My father said nothing, which was its own full sentence. What I noticed, what I filed away and kept, was that my brother's fiancée was not laughing. She was standing near the bar, her sparkling water in both hands, and her face had gone completely still. Not cold, still. The particular stillness of someone processing information they were not expecting to receive in this room at this moment. She looked at my brother. She looked at me. She looked at the space between us. Then she looked down at her glass, and something in her expression shifted in a way I couldn't read yet, but would understand later. When the applause faded and the music came back up, I excused myself to the hallway. I needed 2 minutes and a wall to lean against. The corridor was long and beige and smelled like industrial carpet cleaner. And I stood in it with my back flat against the drywall and focused on breathing slowly until my hands stopped shaking. I was not going to go back in there and make a scene. I was going to collect myself, finish the evening, drive back to Kingston in the dark, and deal with what I was feeling in my own apartment, on my own time, where no one could watch me do it. My parents found me after 10 minutes. My mother's message was that I needed to go back inside and thank my brother for the toast because I was making things awkward. My father said he'd been just being funny, and that I had always been too sensitive, and that I shouldn't ruin this for him. I looked at them for a moment. My father's collar was crooked. My mother had lipstick on her right canine. These are the things you see clearly when someone has just confirmed, in the most practical possible terms, what you have suspected for a very long time. He told 68 people that you bailed me out of debt, I said. That didn't happen. My mother's expression did something very small and very specific. Well, she said carefully, we were there for you emotionally. I went back inside. I sat at my table. I ate my chicken and talked to the colleague beside me, who was kind enough to not mention the toast. I helped stack chairs at the end of the night. I drove to my cousin's house and slept on her pull-out couch and stared at the ceiling for an hour before I finally went under. 2 days later, my brother's fiancée called me. She asked if we could meet privately, just the two of us, the next time I was in Ottawa. She said it wasn't urgent, but that there was something she needed to tell me, and that she needed to tell me in person. Her voice was measured in the way I remembered from the party, controlled, working through something. I drove up on a Thursday in early May. We met at a coffee shop on Bank Street. Not a trendy place, just a neighborhood spot with good light and small tables and the kind of ambient noise that lets people have private conversations in public. She was already there when I arrived, her hands around a mug, and she looked tired in a specific way that I associated with who had been sleeping badly because their mind wouldn't stop running the same calculation. She told me that 8 months ago, she had transferred $48,000 to my brother. She said it the way you say something, said that you've been holding in your body for weeks, and that still doesn't feel quite real when it comes out of your mouth. She had been saving that money for 3 years, a portion of every paycheck, set aside the way nurses do, because nurses see enough emergencies to know that a financial cushion is not optional. She had trusted my brother with it because, at that point, she trusted my brother with most things. He had explained it carefully. He had told her I was struggling with debt from my divorce, that our parents were quietly contributing what they could but couldn't cover the full amount, and that he wanted to help me before he and his fiancée started their lives together. Wanted to come into the marriage, knowing he had done right by his family. He had made it sound like character. He had made contributing feel like joining the family early. I had never received a single cent. The $48,000 had gone into a personal account his fiancée had never had access to. He had used it as a shortfall payment on the down payment for an investment condo in Toronto's Liberty Village, registered under a numbered company in his name alone. She had discovered the transfer records 6 weeks before the engagement party. while reviewing their finances ahead of moving to a joint account. She had confronted him. He had called it a misunderstanding and said the loan to me had been restructured, and asked her to trust him. She was still deciding what to trust, still extending the benefit of a doubt. She couldn't quite bring herself to cancel when he stood up at his own engagement party and publicly announced that our parents had been the ones helping me. He had erased her $48,000 from the official story. He had replaced it with a fiction in which he was the generous older brother and I was the family project. And he had told that fiction to 68 witnesses. She slid a folder across the table. Key transfers. Bank statements. The Liberty Village condo listing with the numbered company registration attached. She had organized it the way you organize something when you're a person who needs to be certain before you act. I have already spoken with a solicitor, she said. He says I have a strong civil claim, possibly more than civil. She kept her eyes on mine. I'm not asking you to do anything. I needed you to know that none of this was your fault, and I needed to know whether you knew. I told her I didn't. She nodded, as if she had already known the answer but needed to hear me say it. My brother called me twice in the weeks that followed. The first time, he was careful and slightly conciliatory, vague enough to deny later, probing enough to understand what I knew. The second call was different. He said his fiancée was being irrational, and that family needed to stay unified, and that if I was thinking about doing anything to make things more difficult, I should remember who our parents had always listened to. It wasn't technically a threat. He was too precise for explicit threats. But it was delivered in the register of someone who was letting you know, clearly, what your available choices were. Then my parents called. My mother's voice had the quality of someone reading from prepared notes. She said my brother's fiancé had gotten confused about some financial transfers. She said the family needed to present a unified position while things were being sorted out. She said that speaking to any solicitor would mean choosing a stranger over my own family, and that she knew I was still upset about the toast, but that this was not the time. I thought about the toast. I thought about the hallway. I thought about the word emotionally used in place of financially in a sentence about support, as if the two things were interchangeable. I thought about 3 years of Sunday night spreadsheets and February evenings eating toast alone and rebuilding my credit score percentage point by percentage point without asking anyone for a single dollar. I said no. My mother's voice changed. She said I had always been difficult. She said I was ungrateful. She said that after everything, and here she paused in a way that let the everything expand to fill whatever space it needed to fill. I was choosing to destroy my brother's life over something I hadn't even been part of. I told her I was choosing not to lie. I told her I was going to provide a sworn statement to the solicitor, confirming that I had never received any money from my brother. Not $48,000. Not any amount. And that the financial narrative he had constructed and delivered at his own engagement party to 68 guests was entirely false. I wasn't doing it for revenge. I was doing it because she had sat across a table from me in a Bank Street coffee shop with 3 years of savings receipts in a folder, and told me what had been done with her money, and I could not pretend I hadn't heard her. My mother hung up. My brother's solicitor attempted to recharacterize the $48,000 as a voluntary investment partnership. The documentation did not support that characterization. My sworn statement, combined with the bank transfer records, the numbered company filings, and his fiancée's own communications with him around the time of the transfer, meant the civil case was clear. She was awarded the full $48,000 plus legal costs. The Liberty Village condo had to be liquidated to cover it. The CRA was also notified, separately, about the numbered company and the undeclared rental income it had been generating. That became its own process, ongoing. I learned most of this through a cousin who had been at the party and who messaged me one evening in August to say she had put the full picture together and was sorry she had laughed. I sat with her message for a while before I replied. By then, I had already sent a message to the family group chat. 43 members, cousins and aunts and uncles across Ottawa and Toronto. And a few in Vancouver I barely knew but who had been included on the original engagement announcement. I had written it carefully, no anger in the language, just facts, what my brother had said about me publicly, what the actual truth of my financial history was, what he had done with his fiancée's savings. I attached nothing and claimed nothing I couldn't support. I just told the truth in the same channel where the lie had, in a sense, been told. The chat went silent for about 40 minutes. Then it did not go silent. My mother called 3 times that evening. I let it go to voicemail. My uncle, whom I hadn't spoken to in nearly 2 years, sent a message that said simply, "I always had questions about him. I'm sorry this took so long." An aunt on my father's side, who had been in the room for the toast, and who had laughed, sent a longer message that I read twice and then put face down on my coffee table and sat with for a while. Because it said the kind of things that are difficult to receive gracefully, and that matter anyway. My brother has not addressed the group chat directly. The engagement is off. He is renting a smaller apartment in Etobicoke now. And from what I understand through family, the legal proceedings with the CRA have introduced a level of complexity to his professional situation that is still unresolved. My parents, on the occasions they do reach out, use a tone that is quieter and more careful than before. They have not apologized. I don't think an apology is coming in any form I would recognize, but the carefulness is there. And carefulness, after years of carelessness, is its own admission. Even if no one says so out loud. I drove back from Ottawa to Kingston the evening. I sent the group chat message and stopped at a rest area on the 401 just east of Brockville. It was a cool evening. May in Eastern Ontario will do that, give you a warm afternoon, and then remind you by 8 o'clock what latitude you're living at. I sat in my car with the engine running and the heat on low and watched a family load back into an SUV from the fast food side of the rest stop. A kid dragging his feet, a parent hoisting a younger one onto a hip. The ordinary choreography of people moving through the world together. I thought about the engagement party, about the dress I had altered myself, about the photo display I had stayed up past midnight to finish, about standing on that off-white travertine floor counting tiles while 68 people laughed at me, and smiling the smile I had spent 32 years calibrating to just the right size. About being asked in a beige hallway that smelled like carpet cleaner to go back inside and say thank you. I had been showing up for a family that had decided somewhere along the way that my showing up was simply what I did. That it was structural, like load-bearing walls, and that it would hold regardless of what was built on top of it. I had let them believe that because it was easier than the alternative. It was easier than what I was doing now, sitting in a rest stop parking lot on the 401, having said no and meant it, and let the consequences come. The thing about finally telling the truth is that it doesn't feel the way you imagine it will. It doesn't feel like victory. It feels like a lot of things at once. Grief and relief, and a strange quiet sadness for the family you spent your whole life hoping to eventually become. The one that was always just one more accommodation away from being possible. But underneath all of it, something had settled that I hadn't known was unsettled. Something had stopped bracing. I am 32 years old. I am a primary school teacher in Kingston, Ontario. My apartment is small, my savings are modest, and my life is exactly as large as I have made it. Without assistance, without a family narrative in which I am the successful one, without anyone's approval as a precondition. I pack my own lunch. I pay my own bills on time. I go to work every day and help children learn to read, and I find that genuinely, quietly extraordinary in a way I have never once felt the need to defend to anyone. My brother tried to make me into a story in which I was the weight that needed carrying. He told that story to 68 people, and then to his fiancée, and then to our parents, as a reason to close ranks around him. He built an entire architecture of fiction on top of the one honest phone call I had ever made to my mother. And he delivered it in a room full of witnesses, with a champagne glass and a smile. But a story only holds if no one tells the other one. I told the other one. And I am still here, and the version of me that needed to be small so his could be large. That version is gone, and I am not going to miss her. Not even a little.